Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about behavioral characteristics that I've seen in my observation in a preschool special education class. The students in there range from 3 to 5. So I was able to observe the student on a couple different days, which made it really interesting to see different behaviors that you would typically see in a child with autism spectrum disorder. I was able to see a lot of those behaviors with this student. I saw some tantruming. I had seen some hand flapping and definitely lack of social interaction. He mostly kept to himself. And on one day in particular, he did fixate on a fire truck. He really wanted to play with the fire truck, but the teacher wanted him to do his work first and then he could have the fire truck. For about 30 minutes, he was tantruming and screaming and just only fixated on the fire truck. It was pretty typical behavior that you might see in someone that has ASD. And he definitely needed sameness. When I interviewed the teacher, she had stated that they had just had to change the schedule because it's a new school year and he was there last year, but they had to change because of the recess schedule had to change. And so he actually was remembering what the schedule was 2 months ago. And so he really was having a very difficult time with having to transition to the activity that was on the schedule now because he's remembered it before. So he definitely struggled with difficulty in changing his routine. And he has intense and prolonged emotional reaction. When I was in there, he screamed for approximately 40 minutes because he wanted to have the fire truck and he wanted to have it without doing his work first. And as far as eye contact goes, he would make some eye contact, but not very much. And his language was very concrete, and he was missing a lot of those connecting words. He would say 4 words, but he would babble in between because he knew there were other words, but he didn't use them. So those are the behaviors that we've learned about that I actually was able to see. The interventions that the teacher was able to put in place was Picture Exchange Communication System, which is also known as PECS. And she also was using a visual schedule and she was using pivotal response training. And this was a new thing that she had just started implementing in the class. So the Picture Exchange Communication System is a way of communicating using pictures. And the teacher used this during snack time, on his schedule, and just all throughout the day. Even though he did have language, the visual supports really seemed to help him a lot to be able to communicate. So here we see his visual schedule. And this visual schedule was used for every single transition that he went through in his day. Every single step. He went to Red Table. She had a picture of Red Table. He went to Play Center. She had a picture of Play Center. So it was in the exact order that this student would have to transition to. Also, she had a visual timer. This was a timer that she would use to allow him to see how much longer he had in an area. And this seemed to be very effective in helping him see how long he had to stay in an area and when it was going to be time to transition to the next activity. The last intervention that I was able to see in the class is called Pivotal Response Training. And this training is used to allow the student a choice in participation. So she just started implementing this in the class. The first step in pivotal response training is to establish the learner's attention. You have to be able to have the student's attention before you could even move on to step 2. Then you have to allow shared control. You have to allow the student to have some control in his environment, in her environment. And step 3 is using learner choice. So the teacher actually implemented this while I was observing the couple days that I did. This is an example of how the teacher would use the schedule. The teacher would allow the student to go through all the activities, and then the student would have this word choice on a schedule. And then the student would then take the choice picture and match it to the choice board, which here I have writing and calendar. So the student was able to choose the activity. What the teacher explained is that the student did not want to do certain activities. He did not want to participate in calendar. So the teacher allowed him a choice of something else that would be academic enough for him to participate in. So he got the opportunity to choose between those two activities. The days that I was able to see, the teacher had just begun to implement that pivotal response training. And the first day, the student was not very happy. He screamed for about 40 minutes, tantruming, wanting to get his way. He didn't want to use a schedule. He didn't want to make a choice. He would scream and say, no choice, no choice, no calendar, no music, no. He did not want to participate. On day 2, he went and picked a choice. Although he wasn't entirely happy and didn't want to stay on task for the amount of time that he needed to, and he did have 2 times during that day that he did tantrum for about 5 minutes. It was an improvement from the day before. 40 minutes to 5 minutes. And then finally, on the 3rd day that I observed, I had seen him improve tremendously. He went through his whole schedule. He actually, when he made his choices between music and movement and writing, he actually chose to do music and movement when just 3 days ago, he wasn't even wanting to do music and movement. He screamed to not participate. But that day, on the 3rd day, he went and participated in music and movement. So the teacher allowed him the flexibility to move from the writing activity and the music and movement. She said at this point, she wants him just to choose between the two, and she's okay for him to switch back and forth between those activities. But she doesn't want to push too much. She wants him to feel successful, because then you might have another set of problems. It's very important for you to make sure that you have the exact amount of structure, the perfect situation for that student to be successful. So here I have attached a chart that provides examples of behaviors that may need a task variation. So maybe you have too high of a goal, or maybe it's too easy and now the student is bored. So you have to have the perfect amount. And I think the teacher has the perfect amount. She just wants him to be able to follow through his schedule without screaming. And she went from 40 minutes of screaming to just 3. So I think that this intervention has been so effective for this student. It is the perfect fit. I think that the student will be very successful. And if you want to learn more about the pivotal response training, I've attached a link to where I found my information about pivotal response training. And it has very detailed information on how to implement this. When we have a choice in what we're doing, we tend to do things better, or we are more engaged in learning if we're given a choice. In fact, I think that in my class, I'm going to be using choice learning to get the students to have that intrinsic motivation to learn. I'm really excited that I was able to see how effective this intervention was. If you have a challenging student, maybe this is the intervention you might want to try.